Good afternoon. I thought I would tell you all a little bit of a story. I've been really involved since I was elected to the city council, and learning a lot about our city, learning a lot about my family and our history in the city. And last year, I was at the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative meetings, and our mayor was talking about how downtown was a part of town that his great-great-grandfather had lived in as a pastor of the First Baptist Church. And as he was saying, as he was mentioning that, I decided that, my great-grandfather lived down there too. And I wondered how close they were. It turns out they lived about a mile apart, both in the early days of Newport News. I thought that's interesting. And I had an event at the Newsom House downtown. And I said, well, that's really kind of close to where my great-grandfather had his store, down on the corner of 26th Street and Chestnut Avenue. And a little while later, I was over at the NAACP Awards last winter actually, and was driving through the neighborhood down there, and I said, wow, that is incredibly close. And we have a photo in my family of my great-grandfather's store down there. He had a grocery store. And in that photograph that was taken about 1917, there is a young African-American woman. And she's out of place. She's out of place not because she's African-American, she's out of place because she is by far the best-dressed person in that photograph. She had a white dress on. She had a fur coat on. And she is probably about 12 years old. So what prominent African-American family lived close to this grocery store? Well, that was the Newsoms. So I wondered, well, did the Newsoms have a daughter? How many kids did they have? So I looked into it, and they had a daughter who was that age at that time. So I talked to the Newport News historian, and they looked at photos of Maurice Newsom and this photograph, and they said, yeah, it probably is her. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So then I went back and I looked at some of the other family photographs we had. And I noticed we had a nice cabinet photograph of a young African-American woman, not as young as the Newsom daughter, but probably in her 30s, maybe 20s. And wow, she is really well dressed. And she bears a striking resemblance to Mary Newsom. And so I have shared that with the Newsom Museum and talked to them and learned a lot about the early days of Newport News. Because in the early days of Newport News, if you go back and you look at the census records, we lived together. We shopped at the same stores. Newport News was a unique place, and it's one of the reasons I believe that we have such a strong African-American community in the city. Because just like a lot of the other folks who came to Newport News, we all came here for opportunities we couldn't find anywhere else. This was a thriving city, a progressive city in its early days. This was a city unlike any other. When you go back to 1880 in Newport News, there were about 850 people here. You go to Richmond, there were 60,000. You go to Norfolk, there were 20,000. But this was a small village where everybody knew each other. And it grew explosively. And it grew progressively. And we were embracing the new ideas of everyone living together and having opportunity. And when I look at our city now, and I look at the opportunity that we lost, it breaks my heart. And I hope that we can return to our roots here in Newport News and be recognized for what we have been in the past. The most racially inclusive, the most progressive city in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you.